Chapter 5. My grandparents really touched me. Both of my grandpas were named John, so I was named after both of them. I always looked forward to getting out of school each spring so I could go spend a week with Grandpa Childers, who was a fun man to be around all the time. It did not matter if the sun shined or not around him because I was in for a good time. He was around 5 feet 6 inches tall, bald-headed, and had beady blue eyes. He was a very short-fused man, but I never recall him being angry at me. I never did see him drunk, but he offered me some blackberry wine, which I refused. He had whiskey in the house too. The aroma in his house was that of a double-barreled shotgun, a single-barrel shotgun, an army rifle, a .22 rifle, and a .45 pearl-handled pistol. He would let me shoot all the guns. His old house was up in a hollow near a creek on a rich man's place. His guns would have brought more money than his house. The house had a fireplace, which Grandpa used much of the time in the winter to spit chewing tobacco. How he loved tobacco, cigars, cigarettes, pipes, and sack tobacco. Prince Albert in a can, and a plug of day's work chewing tobacco. Around him, either the spit was going or the smoke was going up in circles. He generously let me use his tobacco, and I thought it was so big to puff on a Gladstone or a King Edward cigar. Since tobacco made me get a little dizzy, I never did get the habit. I guess I can thank the Lord for getting sick on days work chewing tobacco, because it caused me to vomit and later have the heaves. Grandpa could eat tobacco and it would not bother him. Children grow up will not worry so much about whether the house is clean or not, but the things you do with them will be long remembered. I enjoyed digging for worms, heading to the creek around sunset. A lantern, flashlights, and fishing poles were our equipment. A big fire built on the bank of the creek gave enough light so we could see where we were fishing. How well I remember pulling in those yellow catfish, which Grandpa would fry the next morning. He was an expert at making good cornbread and frying fish. That big black iron skillet of his satisfying my stomach many times. Eggs and hog jowl made a fine breakfast with biscuits and gravy. Every afternoon we would walk up the hollow to the Elrod post office, where he bought me a bottle of soda and a moon pie for 10 cents. Back then, that was what I called living. I remember that Grandpa had other children to line up at the store, and he would buy each one a pop. He had a heart just about as big as his body. He always said he did not want any money in the bank when he died. Playing the harmonica and dancing were his pride and joy. I remember a little 2-year-old boy who would really dance to the music of Short Nin Bread. The pistol always went with Grandpa everywhere he went. He would wrap a big handkerchief around the loaded pistol and stick it in his back pocket. Another old-timer told me that he used to run around some with John before he got married. He told me that my grandpa was dating a pretty woman, and 2 other boys on horses threatened to take her away from John. He said that John pulled out that pistol, cocked it, and told them both to leave and not to ever look back, which they did. He would not back up an inch, not for anyone. He never wanted to see anyone mistreated either. Once upon a time, somebody was about to bother a black man. Grandpa told that person that if he did, he would drop him with a pistol. A number 16 nail has a head smaller than a dime. and he could hit the head from several feet. Do not ever get under his sights, is what people said back then. An old man named Joe lived on the other side of the hill. One winter, a neighbor came to see my grandpa, who was in bed with the flu. He told my grandpa that Joe was in bed, sick, pneumonia. Grandpa said he knew just what Joe needed. He got out of bed, dressed, and went to the woods, and killed a squirrel. He made the squirrel broth and took it to the old man, who was soon to his feet again. Grandpa told me of an incident that I've never forgotten. It used to be 3 rooms and a path. Now it's 3 rooms and a bath. He told me of an old man who lived by himself, who had a quick way to do a number 1 on a cold night when deep snow covered the ground outside. He said the old man had a hole about 2 inches in diameter through the back door and about 3 feet from the floor. He said that before retiring, the old fellow would always go and remove the button from his hole in his pants and insert his penis through the hole and take a good healthy piss before he went to bed. One man, though, thought how funny it would be to catch the old man some night. The other fellow had killed a big rabbit hawk and used one of the hawk's claw on the leg. One can pull the leader or tendon on the leg and make the claws close real tight, like when they catch their prey. He knew the old man went to bed about 8 o'clock every night. He slipped up to the back door and waited for the event. It must have been about 0 outside, and soon he heard the old fellow coming through the door. He heard him slide the button, and through the hole came his penis. When it was just about done urinating, he took the hawk claw and grabbed the old man's penis. He heard moaning and groaning inside by the old man. He let a little pressure off, and the old man started really talking like a cat. He said, "Kitty, kitty, kitty, kitty." He thought that old house cat had a hold of him, and he said, "Now, kitty, turn loose, turn loose." After about 5 minutes, it seemed, he turned the old man loose, and the old man stomped his foot real hard on the floor and hollered, "You damn cat, I'll kill you in the morning." My grandfather Childers could be at home playing with a 2-year-old or talking with a 90-year-old person. He never seemed to really meet a stranger, because he did not want to be a stranger. He carried a friendly helping hand everywhere he went and stood for justice. Born in 1878, he lived for 78 years. He departed his life on March of 1956 after a battle with cancer of the spine. There were enough people to fill the church 2 or 3 times at his funeral. I remember blacks being there. My heart was broken having to leave him, and how it hurt. All the grandchildren loved him dearly, but I feel that I was closer to him. I can still hear him say, "This is John Earl, my grandson." My other grandparents, the Hams, were blessings that I still cherish. Grandma Ham was a pretty woman with her white hair done neatly in a bun on the back and a ridge around the front. She was ever so kind to her grandchildren. Her cooking was great. She made chocolate pies, biscuits, and cookies with cow butter and raspberry jelly. Grandpa Ham's ancestors came from Germany 2 years ago. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 230 pounds. He had a high forehead and a big head of white hair. I remember him for liking to work. He was a workhorse with a lot of horsepower, so to speak. I remember his big wrist well. He could shell corn in a hurry. He could shell corn 11 inches long in about 4 seconds. With his strength, he could just twist it off the cob. He could shell 10 ears to my one when he was 72. and I was 16. His strength fascinated all of his grandchildren. Other men about his age said that he was the strongest man in the country years ago. Using a crosscut saw, it took 2 men to keep him sawing. He made a railroad tie, he told me. He always seemed to be working on something. I remember helping him put a fence up one time. I was about 14. I dug 12 post holes in the dry, hard ground, thinking I had worked hard and would get at least $1 or 2. He had Grandma go get me 50 cents. I guess he was teaching me some character. Well, at least I did not have to pay him for the experience. He was great to be around anywhere. I was a very small boy. But I remember Grandpa's mother, Nancy, telling me about coming to Kentucky when she was a small girl and walking over the mountains behind a covered wagon. I remember her for being a rough-looking woman, around 90 years old. Grandfather and I hoed out the garden, and he told me that he was much obliged. When I got home, I asked my mother what oblige meant. She said it meant thanks for the favor. I told her I knew it did not mean money because I did not get paid. She told me that I probably ate more than I earned. He was one old man who could really work up a sweat. I could have scrapped all the white salt off his shirt at the end of the day. He loved to read the Bible. His leatherbacks on his Bible were half gone from use. He always asked me questions about the Bible. He would ask me if I knew 2 people who were never born and yet died. The answers were Adam and Eve, because they were created. He then asked me if I knew 2 people who were born but never died. Enoch and Elijah were the answers. He would ask me questions such as how many books are in the Old Testament and New Testament, what is the shortest verse of the Bible, and what's the longest chapter, and so on. I knew he believed the Bible. In the end of all flesh comes very soon. I remember that when Grandma Ham departed this life, Grandpa said that he would be the next one. At that time, I was going to Lexington Baptist College. I was down home where Grandpa was then staying with Mom, who fixed his meals and gave good care to him. Mom promised him that she would never put him in a nursing home. I was talking to Grandpa about dying, and I asked him if he knew he was going to heaven when he died. He looked at me smiling from ear to ear and said, I sure do. I'm glad you asked me this question. You have concern for me, don't you? I felt sure he was born again Christian, but I wanted to hear him say yes. I was down home 2 weeks later. I got there at midnight after getting off work. I usually waited to the end, about 9 in the morning, but at this time I had a lunch to get on down home earlier. As I pulled up in front of the house, I saw other cars there, and I knew Grandpa must have been worse. Grandpa heard me coming from the front door and asked Mom who it was. She told him it was me. I went to his bedside, took him by the hand, and told him not to talk if it hurt. He gripped my hand and said, all right, Earl. He was breathing short and hard, and Mom told me he seemed to have pneumonia. His breath got faster and more shallow, and then there were some pauses. At 12 o'clock noon, he raised his head off the pillow and opened his eyes, smiled real big, and waved goodbye, and then closed his eyes. It was a blessing to see him at 80 years old depart this life so graciously. Hard work in the Bible and a good witness are the best memories that any grandfather can leave his grandson. That was chapter 5. Chapter 6 will be coming up in a few moments.